and we are back to go over the Style3D new release. Today I'm going to be talking about the camera settings, the lighting lock, and depth of field. All new updates in this newly released 7.2 version. Let's jump into it. So I'm starting here with Project H from my Udemy course on Style3D. So right now you're going to see that the new rendering window is broken up into two different areas. So now it's all condensed into a render window. And when you have your project all set up to go, you can go here. There's a little drop down for rendering and rendering animation, which will be in a separate video. So once we pop into our render view, we can see that there are several changes to the render window. Number one, you have your ray tracing on. You can have it affected in your 3D view, but also in your render view. So it doesn't matter anymore if you have one or the other. You can activate them both in separate windows. So once you're in the window, the render window, after you've selected your first pose, in this new window down at the bottom, you'll see that your selections in the property editor are a little different. Now you have a light setting where you can have all the props to follow the camera, which is very exciting. I'm a little giggly right now, and you can have your lights actually locked. So this means that any pose that you decide to pose, and we're going to see this in a minute, you'll have to find this when you hit the setting. The property editor will come up. And you have all of these options for your lights. All of your lighting options are at the bottom, so you can brighten your lights. You can actually change the angle of some of your lights and the depth in the area or saturation of some of your lights. So now while I go through some of these settings, which you are able to manipulate, and this is really a great feature for you to learn a little bit more about your lights and what certain things like intensity, changing the color. You could even change the type of light in this same window. So right now I'm just keeping them all as spotlights, but once you learn about the placement, you have free capability of just moving things around. So you have free capability to set up your own custom lighting. But what we clicked on in the beginning was actually having the lighting setting and all of the things that you configure in this first front window. Once you have lock the camera and lock lights to the avatar, I'm going to show you how to change that in just a second, then this setup does not change for any of your render views. So even if you decide to render your back view, the actual set will follow the avatar to whatever pose and position your camera light goes to. So let's see what that looks like after I finish configuring my custom lighting. So there are a few things that you have to remember. Right now, so we set up the lighting in the very beginning to lock the camera and lock all of these different aspects. So let's just take a look at that. We're keeping our environment map the same, and this is actually where you can change the environment map. So just above that, you have the lighting and rendering settings. So locking camera is going to lock it to whatever pose you decide to select. So I'm just going to make a different pose here, or actually a different camera angle. I'm not changing the pose just yet, but I am just going to position where I want to see. And you can actually see that the whole set follows the avatar and just subtly turns. So if you can see, it's actually maneuvering the bottom grid to turn and not the props. The props are following the camera, so if your camera angle changes, you'll see that update immediately in your 3D window, in your 3D render window. But I've selected 4 different angles. Nothing has changed about the lighting. Nothing has changed about the rendering effect. So each render is going to have the same visual effect. It's not going to be determined by rotating the lights. In some cases, in some other software, you have to kind of maneuver the lights. You have to move around the whole set in order to get a back view. And sometimes you even end up deleting a set. So this kind of eliminates that part of the workflow, making it very seamless and very easy within Style3D. This is specific to Style3D. So right now, just checking out my pose is not to where I want to see that neckline starting to bother me, so I just, change the pose. So once we are rendered into a new pose, remember you have to have rendering on in order to have your pose transition from pose to pose. So I have my render selected. I'm going to select a new pose and let her just go ahead and reposition. Let's move some things around so that the neckline looks the way that I intended it to look. So at the bottom, you'll notice that you can just hit the refresh button and it will refresh all of your views. So all of your custom views, you can even go ahead and name those views if you like. You can save those views if you like. If you have a collection or you're working on a portfolio, this is a function of being able to save your views and custom views that you will want to use. Creating a 3D portfolio is another video coming up. So right now, before you forget, like and subscribe. But right now, we're talking about all of these different views happening within this ray tracing window and the custom lighting and all of the different settings. But we're not going to stop here, right? We're going to go ahead and we're going to make a few more changes before we go into our I wish render. And then we're going to come back and talk about everything all together and how it affects your workflow. Okay, so I just made a few modifications to the outfit. Same pose, same number of render views. But now we're going to talk about further camera settings. Depth of field is something that I've always liked about rendering because it adds a little bit of a camera flair to it. It has a realism to it that you would see maybe in a photo shoot or maybe in some other type of realistic photography. So depth of field allows you to pick the area of focus. So depth of field is like the background will be blurred or the front ground will be blurred. But now what they've set up in Style3D is actually, if you go to your settings, this is how you're going to get to your camera options. So I'm going to keep the ray trace window on in the 3D window so you guys can see it a little bit better or bigger, or I wouldn't have to refresh it. So I'm going to make a new view. And right now everything is in focus. But maybe we want to allow some focus to be specifically on the garment. So this is where the depth of field comes in. This is why you would use that. A lot of times you hear about new features in software and you don't know why you would use that. But this is actually adding a photography element to your 3D render. So now you don't have to go into Photoshop or you don't have to go into another area. But if you go into your settings window, I'm going to keep the ray trace on here and then we're going to go to settings. Now in settings, this is where you have all of your lighting, ray trace options. And in the ray tracing options, you have the camera effects. Now the camera effect allows you to mimic a physical camera, like we just spoke about. So now you have your depth of field range, which if you know a little bit more about this setting, you can kind of set it up yourself. But right now, if you want to just quickly help the program to understand where you want your focus to be, you can actually click on the element that you want to have in focus. And then you can adjust your depth of field accordingly. So right now, I have the shirt selected, and as you can see, the background in the 3D window is now blurred out and the garment is now in focus. So now I can go ahead and refresh all of my views. So this is fantastic because now I can also take it into my I wish, and it will render out in the I wish. And we'll take a quick look at these renders. I'm only going to select 3 of them. And then I could go ahead into my AI render. I don't have to keep the syncing on all the time. That pulls out different, it pulls out a lot of energy from your computer, from your GPU. And right now I'm just going to go into my I Wish and we're going to check it out. So before we get into it, remember to like and subscribe. Of course, it helps the algorithm. It helps you get notifications. And remember that I am certified Style3D instructor. And let's get into the renders. Okay, before we get into one more point, I want to bring to your attention that if you have multiple views, you will have to reset your depth of field. So initially I thought you just have to set up your views and then set up your depth of field. But if you're using this feature, consider it as one camera shot at a time that you are applying to the depth of field. If you have multiple views that are similar, but right here I have like a close-up, I have to change the depth of field, and I wanted to let you know about that. So that's it. For the renders, you can see it's applied to depth of field. The model is in the forefront. And that is it for the video, guys. This is extremely, extremely exciting news to happen in Style3D 7.2. Okay, if you made it this long, my course is now $29.99 for the month of December, starting November 29th. Airing this video. Here's the coupon code. Please enjoy and learn and grow.